Hi, it's the 27th of May, 2020, and 7 days of big changes in my life. Good ones, bad ones. And I was walking out today and I remembered my friend Bob Henry. He was an amazing guy, and he was one of my healer, teacher, visionary, warrior friends. He was born in British Columbia and had a tough life. Depression, the financial depression, and hit the West Coast pretty hard. And he joined the Navy, and it was in the Second World War in the Pacific. And he married his sweetheart, Phoebe. I don't know what her last name was, Phoebe. And he became a social worker, and then Bob became a social worker. And he had a friend by the name of John Brown. And John Brown was a social worker, I guess, too. And John and he got very involved with some people in Chicago who were developing new ways of helping traumatized kids, crazy kids. And John got a job running a treatment center for emotionally disturbed kids using these modern techniques. They were amazing, and the place was called Warrendale. And Warrendale became a very important part of my life because I was crazy, and I was faking it that I was sane, and I was faking it that I knew anything. I thought that I knew nothing and that I was stupid, but I didn't let anybody know because it hurt so much. And anyway, my first marriage, I didn't have the skills. I couldn't be real. I was very unaware of my own suffering, totally self-centered. Have you ever wondered why people are so self-centered? What's the new word for it? Well, whatever it is. And I was really unhappy. I was as unhappy in my marriage as I was as a child. But I was faking it that it was okay. And my wife was is still, happily she's still alive, a wonderful woman. But she was a young girl then. And my son was so creative and loved making things, really incredible things. And so one night I was lying in this big long bathtub in this apartment we were renting. And I was reading science fiction, and it was a lovely dissociation and relaxing and everything. And my upstairs neighbor came to the door, and I got out of the bathtub and I put on a towel and opened the door, and she said, "We're having a party upstairs, and have you got any sugar?" And her name was Joanne Reinhardt. And I said, "Sure, here, I'll get you some sugar." So I got the sugar and I gave it to them. And she was living with a friend of mine by the name of Walter Gunn. And Walter and I had met, and we both liked to get drunk. And we were both pretty crazy. And Walter was working at this Warrendale place. And so then Joanne said, "Hey, do you want to come up to the party?" And I thought, no. So I went back to my book and the bathtub and everything, but they sounded like they were having a lot of fun, and I was wide awake, and I couldn't be honest with my wife. It was tough, and I was doing things that I was ashamed of, and had done things that I was ashamed of, and had hurt my son and hurt my first wife. His name was Irma. And so I, I was miserable. So I got dressed and I went up to this party, and here were all these strange people. I didn't know anybody. I only knew Walter and Joanne. And I met my friend Paul, who's still my friend. This was happening about 1960, I don't know, 4. And here was this guy Bob Henry and Phoebe, and they were really kind and present and smart and curious, and they were far more alive than I was. And it turned out practically everybody there was as crazy as I was, but so and there was a woman there by the name of Joanne, and she just sparkled good energy. And I went with Paul, and I did stuff, but I met Bob, and then Joanne and I became friends, and there's lots of funny stories about that. And she's another one of my teachers, major teachers and heroes. And I started learning about the fact that all these people at the party were in therapy together, in group therapy. And Bob Henry was the therapist. And a lot of these people worked at this place called Warrendale. And John Brown and Bob Henry had decided that whenever you work around crazy people and crazy kids, you really need to have somewhere where you can start dealing with your craziness. And so they made this rule that everybody who worked at Warrendale had to be in a group therapy session so they could talk about what was upsetting to them and how they were getting agitated and pissed off and things like that at the kids because they were frightened, and to help them deal with their fears. So it was a very radical idea, but it was one I really still subscribe to, that everything impacts on us, and we've got to kind of come to equanimity so that we're not driven by our unconscious parts. And so I fled my son and his mother, Irma, and went off and got a place of my own. And it was, a mattress on the floor and cardboard boxes for shelves and things like that. It was pretty miserable. But I developed a friendship with Joanne. And Joanne and I, eventually, I moved into Joanne's apartment. And she'd been married before. And we, of course, I had communication problems. I was crazy. I didn't know who I was. And so Joanne said, well, I'll ask if you can come into our therapy group with Bob Henry. And I did that. And then Bob became a mentor to me. He liked me. He saw who I was more than I did. And I like to work. That's my best exercise. And so I would drive up to his house and I would do chores for him. And we would talk, just talking, just being together. And we'd go out in this forest that he had at one point, and he built a little cabin for himself because he was crazy too. And he realized he had to have his own place. He had to be able to get away from his 3 daughters. And his daughters, I hope, are still alive and very special people. But when being the kids of a therapist is really tough. It's got its wonderful benefits, but it's got its tough sides too. And so therapy with Bob Henry became part of my life. And mentoring with Bob Henry became part of my life. And he was a very down-home kind of guy. And he liked a lot of the people that I knew. And Bob and I would get drunk together. And then he got so he couldn't cope with reality anymore. He became so frightened. And he had all these inner turbulences and shadows and all of the stuff from his childhood boiled up. And he introduced me to a guy, his therapist, an analyst by the name of Martin Fisher, who was an expressive arts therapist, and he became a big part of my life. And I'd like to tell stories about Martin. And I eventually worked for Warrendale. I helped them. I was a teacher, and I got disgusted and was fucking up at work, and couldn't keep it together. So I got a job at Warrendale eventually, and I was helping to set up a school in a residential treatment center. That one was called Bob and or John Brown got fired from Warrendale. Anyway, I forget that part of the story, and he started another thing called Brown Camps, and John was crazy too. He eventually went to jail for some financial chicanery. I don't understand it. And he touched a lot of people in jail, and he introduced me to a whole pile of wonderful people. A guy that he'd met in jail by the name of Jacob, who's another one of my heroes. And so Bob Henry, I screwed up the relationship with Joanne. I just couldn't do relationships. I was too self-centered, too self-absorbed, didn't know it. But Bob stayed friends, and then his suffering frightened me. And he was going into what now would be called depression, really deep depression. And I stopped going up there and stopped seeing Phoebe, and then I got a notice that he had died, and we went to his funeral, and I miss Bob, and he's one of my inner heroes. And he comes to me. I call him. I call the parts of me that are connected to him in my inner universe. And we still talk. I was talking to him this morning. And it sounds kind of crazy, but if you want to see a good movie, watch a movie called The Milagro Bean Wars. It's a Robert Redford movie. And there's an old man in that movie. And I am so glad that I've got that old man character as my teacher, because he just shuffles around and he is himself, and he loves himself and doesn't like himself, and that's all okay. Doesn't take himself too seriously. Doesn't expect much out of life, like probably he did when he was younger. And he's very much, the character is very much the servant of life. He does a lot of little things nobody sees that have an effect on how everybody around is doing. And that's kind of my thing. My friend Lawrence Smith, when I was really terribly depressed, he said, look, he said, don't waste your life. Being a human and having a human body is a big deal. Don't waste it. So if you can't do anything else, just help other people. But don't do it so that they know about it, because you'll fuck up that relationship too and probably cause them pain too. So just watch for things that you can do. Pick up garbage, you know, close the screen door. Nobody's looking. But just help out. Help make things better in little tiny ways. If somebody's in trouble, and you just go and help them. And if they want to, you know, pay you back and stuff, just say, nah, it was good helping you, if they catch you helping them. But try to help other people in ways that they don't feel put down. They don't feel weakened by. But otherwise, just do stuff that makes a difference and nobody knows. Anonymous good deeds. So anyway, this is a tribute to Bob Henry. He's a handsome guy, funny as all get out, smart as a whip. Had a big beard, big head of hair, and loved to eat. And I hope he loved to have sex and get massages, but I probably didn't, because sex is really hard when you're fucked up. And love is almost impossible because you're so self-absorbed. So that's my tribute to my friend Bob Henry. Bobby, thank you very much. You're a good man. I'm happy that you're part of my life and so many people's lives. And occasionally, you know, I still see people, I'm still in communication with people in that very first therapy group. They're very dear, close friends for, well, since 1967 or 66, 65. That's a long time. Anyway, thank you, and please tell your stories about your heroes and how they've helped you and helped you keep on. Help you stay calm, help you be more aware, help you be kind, help you share, help you not be greedy, just help you be a nice person. Okay, I'm gonna shut this off. Isn't this palm really lovely here? I just love it. It reminds me of a big palm tree I enjoyed in Sai Baba's ashram when I visited there, and there's palms like that where I go to in the jungle in Peru and Ecuador. Okay. Much love to you. Bye.